Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Brief. Today, we're very fortunate to have Ryan Mattison here. Ryan, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about your background, kind of your career arc, and where you are today and what you're up to?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Chris, for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be here and talk about marketing. It's obviously feels like our industry is really at an inflection point right now, right? Like the world is so different than it was 5 years ago, and it's almost impossible to think what the world will be like in 5 years. But it's exciting to, be on and share my thoughts. So I have spent my entire professional career outside of a very, very brief stint working in law in the tech marketing world. I got my start working at a communications consultancy boutique, really focused on Series B to Series D startups in the B2B space. The company is called Eastwick. Got acquired by a larger international agency called Hotwire, and I really ran the gamut in terms of areas in B2B. I did infrastructure, analytics. I did some work in the security space. I did even a little bit of consumer tech. Wasn't really for me. I'm really a B2B guy. But when I was there after about 4.5, 5 years, while I loved working and consulting with clients and advising them, I realized I wanted to be the client, right? I wanted to be the person who's actually in-house making the decisions, driving, not just the execution, but the strategy, and really able to have a seat at the table, engaging with the executive team, with our investors, with our customers, to really build shape stories, because that's really the core of how I think about marketing. Is like marketing is at its core building and crafting a narrative that moves the hearts and minds of the people that matter, right? Whether those are employees, investors, customers, the media, right? And so by going in-house, I was able to really, again, have an ability to like own that narrative. So I joined an early stage startup called ThoughtSpot. I was there for 7 years, which I feel like startup years are like dog years. So I spent quite a bit of time there. Started as, running the content and communications team of one, myself, and, built that out into the brand and comms team, where we were running, things like corporate storytelling, campaigns, communications, events. So I was really able to be looking at, again, how do we like build that narrative and disseminate it across all the different channels that we have, again, to like build really like the soul of who the company was. So I was there for 7 years, great run. And then about a little over a year ago, I had made the decision, I thought about great company, loved working with the folks there. But I'd been in the analytics space for a long time, right? So I wanted to do something still in B2B, but something that was a little bit different. And so I, through my network, met Abby, who is the CMO here at Cribble, hit it off with her. And I really loved the blend of really deep, meaningful, but complicated technology, right? Like the company was going from its first flagship product Stream to being more of a portfolio company with a multitude of products, Lake, Edge, Lakehouse, really thinking about search, right? So thinking about how they have this collection of products that work together to solve a really different challenge or set of challenges in the data space. So working in the telemetry side, so not as much on the business data, but a whole underserved class of data and professionals that really are sort of these unsung heroes, right? In the world that we all live in. Everybody uses software today. Everybody, engage, like every organization relies on, so many tools and technologies, and telemetry and the professionals, the security and IT professionals who manage all of that, really are kind of the backbone of modern organizations, but haven't seen necessarily the innovation and kind of revolutionary changes in technology that we've seen on the business side of the house, where I have previously worked in analytics. And so, meeting Abby and getting to really understand that, okay, there's this massive opportunity for the company, and really how do we build the story that tells that narrative and gets those folks, whether those are our buyers, our operators, investors, again, meet like all of the folks who really believe in, understand the sea change that's at hand, and that Cribble is the company, the technology that is helping to drive that. And then what got me really sold on it was actually meeting the folks here and seeing how different the approach to building brand was. That was really what sold me. There's a One of our core values is irreverent but serious, and I saw that so true and through every single interaction that I had with the executive team, with the rest of the marketing leadership team. Uh, and it's been a really like fun way to think about like how can we be really playful and human and lean into kind of the geek chic that is what our users live in their personal lives, and build that into our brand. And so yeah, I joined about a year ago. It's been a one hell of a ride, I will say, so far, growing really fast. We announced in 14 months, we went from 100 million in ARR to 200 million in ARR. Crazy growth, as we continue to expand new geographies, new product lines. We continue to expand, our team and our capabilities. So it's been a lot of fun to be a part of the journey, and also to help steer the ship and build the story for who Cribble is today and who Cribble will be in the future.
Ryan, I love that. Thanks for all that you shared there. There's so much. And I could see how it all adds up to where you are now, and commend you in having the foresight and like focus to find an organization that actually embraces marketing. So many tech firms, because they're engineer driven or developer driven, they want to be about speeds and feeds, and the decision maker on the other side is deciding based on obviously the product mix and how well it could fit into their life, but the first thing they decide on is emotional context of like the culture and the belief system of the organization. Because even a self-serve SaaS platform, there's going to be a layer of human interaction that's going to define that first step. And, as I often remind people, our senses as humans are analog. And as much as we try and, rationalize our way into, bits and bytes as the defining factor or lower funnel dynamics, the humanity of brands and the culture of brands is really essential. Um, Talk a little bit, because you've talked about, the evolution from a few products to now having a portfolio and a growing portfolio. Talk about how you've balanced and maintained that sense of culture and storytelling around the brand and the integrity of that, while adding to the kind of pillars of offer underneath that belief system that you've built.
Yeah. I I think that actually goes back to the point you were just making about the importance of leading first with the human component of technology, right? Like technology only exists if people, or only matters if people are using it, embracing it, adopting it, leveraging it, right? And the core of all of those things that we just said is the human, right? And so as I think about how you can maintain the values of an organization, but more, in my world, and probably more importantly, is even like the brand. Like, how do you maintain who the company is, the soul of the organization? That really starts with thinking about the human that you're serving on the other end, right? So as you add more products and offerings into your portfolio, it's not about what does this capability do over here and what does this capability do over here. It's what is this larger set of challenges that our operator or our user is going in and facing every single day, and how do we think about everything that we're building going in and helping to solve those challenges or make their day better, easier, more enjoyable. I often think about it, and it's one of the things that I really like about Cribble, right? Is our founders went in, at the first pitch deck that they had before the company was even, real. And they had these list of products that they wanted to build, because they started not just with, what's the TAM for these products, or, what's the distribution model for these? It was, what are the problems that security and IT professionals are facing today? Uh, and what are the problems going to look like in the future? And how do we think about building a complete set of offerings that allow them to mitigate those challenges, right? So they can either have more time back in their day, they can focus on the work that is more meaningful, to them, that helps them build the skills they need to advance their own careers. And I think a lot of that comes from the ethos. Our founding team really were the practitioners in this space, right? They came from that world of like, I know these challenges so deeply, and that's something that I think is for every marketer right out there is think about as you're building and expanding, your own story, whether it's new products, new geographies, right? New capability, like everything needs to be rooted in the humanity of the person that you're serving on the other side. Nobody really cares that they're, able to do something 5% faster. That 5% may really matter, but what does that let them do? Does that give them, the ability to, solve a systems issue more quickly so that they can be, the hero to their team and to their colleagues? Does it allow them to get more time back so they're not running a report on Sunday night, but can run it Monday morning? And that means actually they get to spend Sunday night with their family, right? Those are the things that really drive meaningful marketing, right? As opposed to marketing that is predicated on an inside out world. I think the best marketing is outside in. It's what does the world around us look like? What is the needs, challenges, wants of our users? How do we go and solve those? And then think about how every single piece of the product portfolio that you're building work together to go out and address those challenges.
I totally agree. We often are counseling clients, particularly in the B2B space, to um, focus on customer-centric KPIs. And we purposely start the conversation there because when we say brand or culture or, kind of upper funnel context, a lot of them are allergic to it because they've frankly, in some cases, been sold a bill of goods that wasn't real, or they were, led down a path where it wasn't really representing authentically what they stood for, in part because sometimes they couldn't express it and the team wasn't really enabled to draw that out of them. But by putting the customer first, and really understanding their needs and lowering any of the friction in their lives and enriching their experience in every touch point you can, that ultimately the culture around that starts to emerge. And it becomes, I mean, it is the brand, right? It's
Yep.
funny how you almost don't have to then do a brand brief because the spirit of doing that really well almost defines itself. And then you can do content around that and, executive thought leadership and all the stuff that frankly, a lot of brands need in the B2B space that it's kind of a gap for many. Tell us a little bit how, because you touched on how you're fortunate in that the leadership came from the space and, were CTOs or senior, tech folks. And, so they felt those pain points. But what do you do to keep that fresh? Because things change at, the pace of, quantum pace these days now, right? What do you do to keep that fresh for everybody?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to do is to really root it in the reality of your customers. And what I mean by that is, it's easy sometimes to get wrapped up in this is our view of the world, this is how things should look. But really, if you can't marry that or base that in the again the actual like day-to-day operations, what does it look like when your customers or your users are going in and having their quarterly review or their annual review with their manager? What are the things that they're talking about? What are the challenges that they're facing? What are the technologies around them? How are those evolving, right? Because every B2B company would like to think that they stand on their own, but the reality is none of them do. Everyone is part of a larger ecosystem. That's the stack is connected to another stack, connected to another stack. Like everybody is connected to each other. And I'm fortunate enough to spend a lot of time, in front of customers and prospects, given that part of the remit for my role is, trade shows, especially the big corporate trade shows, right? I'm going to reInvent, I'm going to RSA, I'm going to, Black Hat actually just in a month from now. I plan our customer conference, CribbleCon. And so I'm spending a lot of time hearing from them, seeing how our messaging, our content, our storytelling is resonating. What gets them to their eyes to perk up? What gets them to lean forward? What gets them to say, "Hey, I want to spend more time, not just looking at your booth, but I want to now talk to somebody and get a demo." And so that really, to me, like that exposure is how you can stay like rooted and grounded. You really do need to be thinking about not just how are things performing, on my digital platforms and channels, but how are real people engaging, and sort of biting off, chewing, digesting the marketing that you're putting out, because that really, again, is how you're going to know if it's moving the needle. Um, Now, it's not always the most quantitative, and that's where I think you need to find that balance, right? Like, where can you find the data and that the quantitative and qualitative that work hand in hand? And that's kind of the art and science of marketing, right? I think sometimes uh, in the last 10, 15 years, marketing has swung so far into the quantitative side that it's missing the qualitative, right? And I I have a belief that, there's these like crazy, wacky, interesting ways of doing marketing that like if you're only going by like what's going to move or what you expect is going to move the needle, you're just kind of doing incremental improvements. You're missing the wild swings that actually can deliver that massive step change in performance that gets people to go like, I remember who that company is. Because as powerful as a email campaign can be, I've seen those where I've been doing better segmentation, getting a better response time in terms of being able to like open and load and all of that. Like if you have a funny subject line that someone goes like, that's super like relevant to me, and that makes me think and go like, that's going to be the thing that gets you from you know uh your 12% to your 18%, and that is so much
Yeah.
more meaningful. That 50% growth in terms of like opens or clicks is going to be so much more meaningful than, okay, we spent a ton of time designing these experiments, went from 12 to 12 and a half to 13. They're both important, but as an industry, we have very much, I've seen, sort of lean so hard because we have so much data available to us into what are these like micro optimizations as opposed to like what I think marketing is really about, which is how do we actually get to be front and center and in the hearts and minds of the people that matter.
I love that. It reminds me, I had the good fortune to, at an agency, years ago, to manage the first ever global campaign for the HP Personal Systems Group. So big enterprise focus of desktop, laptop hardware, and most of the brands out there are doing speeds and feeds stuff, and we, knowing that the demand for a more interesting approach was out there, we did a campaign using haiku. Ag- It's actually started off acknowledging that 5 nines reliability is not acceptable, but if you just say that, like, who cares? Like, of course,
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to say, we're 5 nines, that's good enough. I mean, even though sometimes I think you look at some of the ads and it was that would be the takeaway. The kind of human insight that we leveraged was that nobody was honoring the intelligence of the people working in IT. And all kinds of stereotypes that were just negative and not particularly good in the way they were treated. And by doing haiku, we actually had people in the industry, at trade shows, at other events, online, talking about how they read into the meaning of the haiku, which, I mean, that's where we felt like we'd really connected with people on a human level, like you're talking about. And I always, to me, the work that I admire most is stuff that does that, and does that in a way that's really, you know, really human on the surface, but in the end there's a little bit of a puzzle to it, but not so much that you feel pushed away, or that it's too clubby, because that can be a risk. But as you said, something as simple as an email can be breakthrough if it just has that humanity and that connection that's there. And again, putting yourselves in their shoes. I mean, like, did you want to see another email that's just like, give me 5 minutes of your time? No, like, stop. I don't need that.
Yeah.
You talked about, like, um, I'm going to link back. You'd mentioned when we first talked about, having a lot of, like, part of what you enjoy about what you do is putting the campaign together and developing the storytelling and making sure that it has that human connection. Um, Talk a little bit about, because how do you find like those nuggets, those insights, the things that you can weave into that line on the email that are kind of, you write a brief and you've got the strategy, everybody's focused on that, you've got your personas and you've got all the, day in the life of your target and your ICPs, but those are foundational, right?
Mhm.
Where do you go to find the nuggets that turn you on and have you go, oh, here's something to test and learn, and I'm excited about this. And how do you infect the team with that kind of desire as well?
Yeah. So one of the things I think that is really important. So a couple of ways that I would approach that. One is I think even everything what we just described as those foundational elements start to like break people down from being people into being audiences, right? And I think one thing is to remember that like every person that we're working with, every person that you're trying to reach is like a human and exists as a human outside of work. They're a
Mhm.
human before they are a persona or a buyer in a segment in a geo, at a stage of company maturity. Before they're any of that, they're a human. So asking yourself, and it seems so like simple, but the fundamental question of like, would I care about this? Would this get me to be interested in something? If you're again, like we talked about before, spending time with your customers, you understand who they are as people, not just as, consumers of your product. Would they care about this? And one of the things I think about is, again, just thinking about email. I remember when we were doing at my previous company, we were doing, the email marketing for our customer conference. And one of the things that we had this uh, probably to the counter of what I'm saying, we had spent so much time on like, all right, our ICP is, this very senior data professional. They're very serious. They're almost always like stressed out about their job, right? Their tenure is only 18 months. They're having to fight battles with, other members of the C-suite on why does their role exist and what value do they deliver. And they're not just a technology buyer. They have to drive change management, but that's how they're saying, right? And we had this like really like heavy view and like they need this like big and thought leadership, and that's what's going to drive them. And I had one of my the women who I worked with, who led my content team. She was like, "Well, I mean, The Last of Us right now, season 1 is on, and that's like the biggest show in the world. And I want to do an email campaign that's based on The Last of Us. Like, why you want to be like, Joe and Ellie, don't get left behind and come to this show." And we did face a lot of pushback, right? Like my executive team was like, I don't know, this feels like really out there. We've never really done anything like this. So it was like, okay, but as a person, I'm probably watching this show, or some of us are. It's the biggest show on TV right now. We're about to get into the season finale, or we're toward the end of the season. So it was like, this would catch my eye. This is not something that I typically see from, a B2B tech brand. Uh, so it started with that, like, who's this human that we're trying to reach? Would it get me? The second piece is I always talk about this with my team. Now I've talked about it with every team I've ever been a part of or led. Is this idea of an experimenter's mentality? Like I want us going in and running tons of experiments, but not just like haphazardly. Like go in with like, this is my hypothesis. This is why I think it's going to work. Here's how I'm going to like actually test this. And here's what I think, the KPIs would look like if it's this successful. So that's what we did, right? We had this email. We're like, okay, the subject line is going to have nothing to do with our company or a data conference or even say the word data. It's going to be about, Joe and Ellie, don't get left behind. And it ended up being our most performant email by like 3x. And it really changed the way that we thought about doing content and creative of like start with right? Like this human element. But we also had a very specific like hypothesis, right? We thought this email is different from the other emails that they're getting about inundated, with coming to tech conferences. Uh, it is about something that they're already thinking and caring about. Is going to get them to smile, right? And the KPIs that should look like should be better open rates. It doesn't necessarily even have to be better, like across the email performance, but specifically that open rate. Are they going to stop and open that email because it's different? The subject line is different and
Yeah.
it worked, right? And so that's what I think about is pairing that, like, what's the human element? Who is the human that we're working with? But then bake it into like your own scientific process, right? Like have that experimenter's mentality. Always be thinking like, what is an experiment I can be running? Not just I want to try something new and we'll see if it works. It's like, I think this will change these outcomes. This is how I'm going to measure it. These are the tactics I'm going to employ. And this is the timeline that I'm going to use in order to actually, learn from it. And then if it does work, where else am I going to apply this?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great story, and one that anybody can learn from, because the degree to which any brand can connect to ideas on the rise in culture, and if they don't, they're just missing the opportunity to be like authentically human and relatable.
Yeah.
And, the key is you definitely want to test your way into it and make sure you're not, going crazy, crazy. But, if your company is quirky, if your team is into, that kind of thing, let that be known, because there's going to be a cohort, at least a portion of the audience, that's going to relate to it in an interesting way. And you can then dial that into them and kind of move on to other test and learn kind of ideas with other people. I did a campaign with, I had the good fortune to work on Jack Daniels for a number of years, and we did a campaign around the presidential election. One of the things we learned was that, unfortunately, people were writing in Jack Daniels on their ballot, and so we literally did a campaign saying, "While we hope you vote for Jack when you order your next drink, please be mindful that, it's a waste if you write it on your ballot," or something. We said it in a more, the writer did a great job of saying it, much better than I just did. But the premise was real, and it put us into the cultural conversation again, away from where everybody had been engaging and thinking about Jack. And I think that you have to give the brand the opportunity to have that kind of conversation, to move it past the speeds and feeds and give it dimension and a sense of permanence and recency even.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. You talked about that you're a B2B guy. I always think that I find that a funny thing, because I'm a human, and I like care deeply about the humanity of all humans. And you talked a lot about how you think about what they do at night, and what's their life away from work, and how do you make sure you honor that and even reflect on that. To me, I think that's the big opportunity in B2B in particular, because so much of it is bad. I mean, just, it's sausage making, grinded out stuff. And, I think we're all better off that the world doesn't have lots of trade magazines anymore, because they were just replete with like product featured bios, that were soulless. Talk a little bit about the way that I mean, why you're so B2B guy, even though I feel like you're really a human, that's really good at relating to humans and focused in the B2B lane.
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm glad you picked up that I believe in human first marketing, and I actually don't think that's separate from like B2B at all. I think those things need to go hand in hand. Good B2B marketing is human marketing. The
Yep.
reason I in particular am passionate about B2B is uh, it's what's so interesting to me about it is how complicated it is, right? Like I said, I did a little bit of dabbling in consumer tech. I haven't done ever like pure consumer marketing, but that is sometimes a little bit more of a like a it's a single product. The buying cycle can be much faster, right? I see an ad, I decide I want to buy that thing. I go out and I buy it. It's not always that short, but like I'm really interested in these, 6, 9, 12-month sales cycles where there's 50 touch points, where they're going to see you, at a trade show is where they hear about you, but then they get a demo and then you're, following, their engagement with your content and saying, okay, they're raising their hand. They're ready to talk to, maybe an SDR. That to me, that really complicated journey is compelling, not just because the journey itself is complicated, but because it allows the story to really have room to breathe. Like it has a rich, you know, beginning, middle, and hopefully not an end, right? There's always more to be doing together, but at least an end where you're like, hey, we've got a closed one. And, we're able to go and think about how do we service this customer? How do we grow with them? How do we help them continue on their journey? Um, and to me, that's the thing that gets my brain, really interested is like, how do we find ways to connect at all of these different parts of the journey that they're going on, right? Because it's not as simple or as short of a journey. Maybe simple is the wrong word. As short of a journey is like, oh, that is a product that I think is really interesting. I've seen it now 4 or 5 times. An influencer that I care about is using it. I saw it on TikTok and I loved it. Okay, I'm going to go and get it. I like okay, you've got to win over usually a multitude of people to, buy off on a technology, all of them with competing in different needs, right? They are all humans, but they also they have different wants, needs, outcomes that they're trying to drive toward. And in B2B, I've found that I have more of a ability to build that longer narrative, which I like doing, right? I like thinking about like, what are all the ways that this story has to come to life, all the different ways that we need to get that story in front of all of the different people who are going to be involved in making this sale happen, this customer successful, and this relationship something that's mutually beneficial for us and, the people that we're engaging with.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, One of the things that we do with clients is what we call an ecosystem map, because it literally visualizes the internal structure of the organization, and then the near proximity external stuff, and then the industry, and in a kind of context beyond. You don't want to go too deep because at some point it's less relevant, but that it's amazing how that informs where time and effort's being applied to the brand experience or customer experience or the team's experience, and opens up the aperture of opportunity for being more human, taking friction out of the equation. And you touched on it that, in your world, you think a lot about the internal and external audiences. Internal is great because so many organizations don't take care of their own, around alignment on the conversation and the ethos. Tell us a little bit about what you do to help kind of foster that internally at your place.
Yeah. So we spend, I think a good brand is your external brand is your internal culture. Like those are one and the same. And I think that's something that Cribble has been really since like day one built on, right? Like, and I think that is super important, right? Like you can't have a different story that you're telling internally than, and I don't just mean story as in like, your brand and marketing campaign, but I mean like who we are, why we exist, the things that we believe in. That's different how we operate together and what we say versus when we go out and we talk to folks, who are outside of the company. So when we talk about, our values being customer first always, being irreverent but serious, being insatiably curious, right? Like those are things that also manifest in all the ways that we engage and drive the behaviors that we have, outside of the company. Um, and I think that continuity is really, really key to getting alignment. And I don't mean just like alignment on what's the project or priority that we're working on. There's like the whole remit of, internal communications tactics, right? Where you're like,
Right.
we've got newsletters that we do. We've got, AMAs with our executive team. We do a big, company kickoff where everyone comes together. We outline like those are all super important um, to get people, all right, are we all working on the right things? How are we making sure that, between departments or teams that we've got a shared set of goals. But the way of working, I think, is actually more important and is more meaningful and indicative of company success than anything else. And so I think that like making sure that as a leadership team, as an executive team, as even an individual contributor, like finding the place where you can say our internal values are those our external values, are those the same, are those homogenous, and if they're not, why? Because then that's where you start to have misalignment and things start to feel a little crunchy or really really crunchy. um as opposed to like, hey, we're all driving towards the same things, whether we're having a conversation about what we should be doing, when it comes to people and, resourcing and budget decisions to, what geography should we be targeting, going out next year to what product line should we be investing in. Those should all be coming from and founded on the same set of norms and values.
I love it. So as you think of the next 6 to 9 months, what one thing stands out in your mind that you want people to know about what you're doing and what to look for at Cribble?
Yeah. I would say again, well, from my personal view, we've got our user conference coming up in National Harbor out in DC in October 12th through 15th. Obviously, I'm pushing it because I want folks to come and attend. But I think the bigger thing is there is no better way to understand what's going on in our space, for our users, than to meet with your peers. Like you can hear it from me, you can hear it from our product folks, you can hear it from our go to market teams. That's all great. But like I I don't hear it. Don't take our word for it. Talk to your peers. Talk to the folks that are, in similar roles as you or facing similar challenges at other organizations. Get hands on with the product. Hear and learn and share best practices. That is the single, I think, most valuable thing that you can be doing if you are somebody who consumes technology, is spending time with folks who are, have either faced similar challenges, capitalized on, opportunities that you want to go out and capitalize on, and building your network, right? And so that's really when I think about like CribbleCon and what we're driving. Of course, as a marketer, we've got all the KPIs, as we talked about before, of like, what does success look like, what pipeline we want to generate. But more important for me is I want people to walk away and go, that was a conference that I either, met somebody who changed the trajectory of my career, or I learned something that really unlocked a new skill set for me, or I discovered a use case that I didn't think was possible to address. And now I'm going out and doing it. And that is, getting me the recognition that I deserve, or enabling me to advance in my career and provide for my family in a way that I want to. So those are really the outcomes. They're less tangible. I can't go and report those in a slide deck to someone, but I know internally for myself that is the point of having one of those conferences. So that's the thing that I'm really, really focused on as we close out the next 6 months of the year.
I think that's great. And I think not only will the peer-to-peer conversations be incredibly rich and fruitful, because it's the semantic and translation, you can, as you said, you guys can deliver that, but when they get it and get in the pocket of that conversation that's really specific and oftentimes like different, coming from different angles, but they find that common ground, it's like magical. And that then, if you can observe it and hear any of that, you can take it back, and it totally informs ways to take that conversation forward and add new dimensions to the culture or the way the brand storytelling goes. That's super cool. This has been great. I really appreciate all you've shared. One of the things I always like to ask towards the end is Hollywood just called and they said they're going to do a biopic on you. What's the title of the movie, and what's the kind of main plot theme, or what do you think it would be?
Yeah, I would. I think the title would be uh, Between Control and Chaos. I think I like to live somewhere in between those. It's a spectrum. Sometimes there's, a lot of madness going on at work or in your personal life, and then sometimes you're able to really like dictate how things are going. But I think the story of my life that I found the most joy in is being able to navigate both ends of that extreme, right, and find a middle ground, because you're never going to have, be on one end totally or the other. Um, whether that's, again, thinking about, your professional life, there are times where there's things outside of your control that are going on. There are things that are sometimes like so specifically your decision to make that's, foundational to, the success of your team. So I think, thinking about how do you swing between both ends of that and navigate through the middle, would be at least the story of my life so far.
I love it. That's fantastic. I could go on about that, but I won't, because that spurs lots of thoughts. Maybe we'll have a future call and our future podcast to dig into that and more. So Cribble is just cribble.io. They can find stuff there. But if they want to find you, Ryan, where should they look to reach out to you if they want to connect?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way. You can just find me, Ryan Mattison, on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me, shoot me a message. I'd love if you're, in the marketing space and the tech space and thinking about, any of the topics that we covered here today. I'm always, game for sharing ideas and learning from smart folks out in the world. So would love to connect.
Awesome. Ryan, thank you so much. And thanks to all our listeners. And we'll see you next time on Beyond the Brief.